Hello, my name is Gray, and I'm going to be kind of telling a little bit of a story and then talking about how it applies to all of you, whether you are trans or not. So basically, what I wanted to start with is that I grew up a tomboy. For those of you who didn't read, this is about trans people and trans things. I am trans. I grew up a tomboy from a very young age, and we just, as a family kind of accepted that that was true. And it didn't really matter. In my mind, I was just myself. And people told me that I was a girl. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess that's what it is. So, sure. And it stayed that way all the way through college. And by the time I got to college, I had a part-time job. I was running a college club. I was in school full time. And I had started to notice that when it was time for my period, I had a lot of pain, but I didn't really know why that was happening. And everyone said it was normal, so I didn't worry about it too much until I had to. I lived right off campus and I was walking from my house to the university, and I had to keep stopping and doubling over because I hurt so bad. And I ended up curled up in the fetal position on the college floor. As I stared at those tiles, I kept thinking, I think I need to see a doctor. And suddenly it started me down this very long, winding path where I ended up somewhere a bit unexpected to me at the time because I didn't know you could be trans. I had no idea that that existed in the world. I just thought I was really bad at being a girl and was trying my best, and that at some point it was going to start making sense and it was going to get easier. Well, it turns out I have a reproductive condition. It's called endometriosis. It's something that a lot of people, uh, both with uteruses and without them, actually have. It's incredibly common. And the main two symptoms of this condition is pain and infertility. And the only way it can be diagnosed is through surgery. So it had turned out at that time that I had an ovarian cyst that needed to be removed. And I was like, okay, great. If that's what needs to happen, we'll do that. And they're like, while we're in there, we'll find out if you actually have this condition or not. It turned out I had that condition. And with that condition, I had an ovarian cyst the size of a grapefruit at 18. It was horrifying and terrible. And with that, they started me on birth control, which is the most common treatment for endometriosis. Endometriosis, we're not sure exactly what causes it, but one of the things that we recognize is that it can be a switch with controlling your period, because a lot of times people have pain around that time period, as well as it is an estrogen disorder. They also think it might be autoimmune. With that, I was like, okay, I'll start this. And I noticed that as we changed the birth control, things about me changed slightly, but a lot of things stayed the same. And I found that to be really interesting because the internal core of me, who I was, the tomboy that I was at that time period, always stayed the same. But sometimes I noticed that I found I had more access to certain parts of me, or certain things were highlighted more, or even that I was having experiences I never had before. And it felt alien, but also intriguing. And with birth control, you have to try a bunch of variations. And since I was focused on managing my pain, if it didn't manage my pain, it wasn't good enough. Eventually, I moved away from this doctor because he was terrible, frankly. Um, and I started working with a new woman who explained to me more of this process. And with her, she's like, well, you're going to be changing your hormonal makeup. And our job is to find the hormonal makeup that works for controlling your pain levels. And I was like, great, okay. I want to be out of pain. At this point, I'd had about 3 hours of energy per day. And otherwise, I was in level 8, level 9 of pain. and regularly in and out of the hospital, in and out of the ER because I was just suffering. So I was like, okay, great. So we switched me to a new birth control, low estrogen. The whole focus is that it's low in estrogen. And I felt different again, better, but still not great, still a lot of pain. And she goes, well, we can remove your uterus to give you the option of having less pain. And at least things won't get worse. We move forward with that. And they leave my ovary because they don't want me to go into menopause just yet. We'd like to avoid that. And I'm like, okay. And it works for a while, and then I start getting sick again. And we start looking at other hormonal makeups. And she goes, well, we want to keep you having some estrogen in your body, but it seems like it's not doing well. There's this new treatment out where we can block all of your hormone production. And you can't stay on it forever, but it tends to help and we can go on and off and etc. And I was like, okay. And with that, I noticed some new changes where suddenly, because I'd always experienced a great deal of depression, I wasn't not depressed, but I was a little bit lighter. I found things a little bit easier. I felt a little bit more myself. I felt like the most optimal version of myself. And I was like, I like this. This is great. I don't have pain and I feel the most optimal. The problem was that you couldn't stay on it. You had to go on it and you had to come off of it. And with that, I was like, okay, I'll come off of it and I have to. And within 2 months, I was back to the same amount of pain that I'd been in. And I was like, I can't do this. We signed up for surgery. I did the surgery. I went into menopause. And when you go into menopause, they actually suggest, if you're young enough, that you go on hormone replacement, but with estrogen. Because it's really bad for your body in some ways to go into menopause too early, and you can develop osteoporosis and a couple other side effects because it's early. And so I'm recovering from surgery, and I'm finally like, okay, I'm going to put this on, put the patch on. Within a couple hours, a friend of mine finds me, and he's like, what's wrong? Because I'm sobbing, and I feel awful. Like to my core, I feel terrible. I feel terrible about my body. I feel terrible about the state of the world. I feel terrible, um, like internally, mentally, everything is terrible. I'm suicidal. And he goes, I think you need to take that off. And I'm like, I think you're right. So I take it off. And I start to feel better. And then I'm like, well, for science, I gotta do it again. So the next day I put it back on. Because I really want this to work. Because I don't want osteoporosis. And I end up in the same exact space. And I take it off and I see my doctor and I'm like, I can't do that. And she's like, I guess you can do menopause. Do you want to try menopause? And I'm like, I guess we're trying menopause now. And so I try menopause. And while I'm trying menopause, I'm like, okay, I'm having hot flashes. I'm really emotional. I tried putting my earring on. I don't cry. Wow, this is very different. And at the same time, I was still myself. These things, how I presented to the world, changed in some ways, but my internal experience of me stayed consistent. And I noticed that my body still felt better the lower and lower my estrogen went. But I gained a lot of weight while menopausal. And with that, I started researching, trying to find a solution. And it turns out there was a solution, but they didn't recommend it. It was a small dosage of testosterone daily. And they didn't recommend it because most of the people who have endometriosis are women. And most women would find the changes on testosterone to be distressing and alienating and socially unacceptable. So essentially, no doctors ever brought it up because they just assumed that you wouldn't want that because that's going to change the way people perceive you and also your mental makeup. And I thought about it and I went, well, I don't know if I want a deep voice. I don't know if I want a beard. I've always been pretty masculine, but I've never been particularly focused on what other people perceive to me as. But I do want to be out of pain. And so the next time I see my doctor, I'm like, I can't be gaining this much weight. I'm a dance instructor and I'm gaining 10 pounds a month and I can't get rid of it. Can we try this? And she looks at me and she's like, comes with side effects. And I was like, yeah, I know, but like, I can't live my life. I'd rather have a beard and live my life than not. So she puts me on it. And suddenly I noticed for the first time in my life that when I checked for that shift of what changed because my hormones changed, that I was happy, that my depression had lessened, that I felt aligned with myself. There was something right about it that hadn't been right before. But I didn't know it hadn't been right. That was normal. I thought it was normal. And I went to my therapist who I'd been seeing for many years and I go, hey, this seems like this is like I'm doing better. Like this is right. And she says, yeah, I've noticed that. I've noted that you seem to be doing better. And I'd at this point had some suspicions that as my body rejected estrogen again and again and again, and I needed to remove body parts to manage this condition that just was not getting better, that maybe there was something else going on. Maybe there was something else I should be concerned about. And I started to wonder, maybe I was a guy. Maybe that I was actually a guy and something medically had happened. And the only reason I noticed and thought about it and even considered it was mostly because of all of these shifts and feeling what felt most aligned for me. And so I started to wonder what will happen if I go on a full dosage of testosterone, if I go on testosterone replacement. Because I wasn't particularly tied to any one makeup, and I wasn't particularly tied to how I looked, because I was always just me. And with that, and some more shenanigans, I ended up starting transitioning before I realized that I was starting to transition. And with it, I started this incidental transition towards manhood. And since then, I've found that there's a lot about the way we conceptualize gender, the way we talk about gender, even the way we medicalize it or not medicalize it, that I feel like does a disservice to this conversation in some ways. Because for me, it wasn't a question of I knew the whole time that I was a boy and then I was trying to move towards that. I didn't know. But it also wasn't, well, me going on these hormones changed me into a man. I was always this way. Today, the thing I say is the only thing that's different about me is I have less pain and I look different. But the way I engage in the world, the way that I embody has always been this way. And so the thing I wanted to bring up to you all and why I wanted to present on this is two things. One, get your hormones checked. If you don't feel good, get your hormones checked. Just try it. You never know. It could be. You could feel better. And the other one is how much of you is your gender and how much of you is you. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Feel free to write those in the chat. It seems like somebody said, including your voice, including the voice of me not caring about the voice or that the voice, oh, the voice changed. Yes. The voice changed actually really quickly, which was surprising. But with the voice, it was interesting in that people said, yes, definitely got significantly lower. And this is actually a little bit too high for how I really should be talking, but I don't know how to control my voice for a bunch of different reasons. Um, but essentially, my voice was already pretty low prior to that. But testosterone will change anybody's body to look a certain way or be a certain way. Um, but yeah, I was wondering if you all had any questions that you have for me about this topic, about me, etc. Does this change who you're attracted to? So for some trans people, it does. For me, it did not. It always was the same. So funnily enough, like I said before, I didn't know you could be trans, but I also didn't know for a long time that gay people existed. And even the ones I knew were, I didn't know a lot about it. So for a very long time, I thought that I wasn't sure if I didn't know the term bisexual, but I saw that there was beauty in all types of people. And I thought it was because I was an artist. I was like, I'm an artist, I'm a portrait artist, and that's why I can see the beauty in everyone, and you all can't. And there's something wrong with you. Like the fact that you can't see this is something about you. Um, so it didn't really change. It's about the same in the ways that it always has been. Um, we have, oh, thank you for you're an excellent storyteller, and I hope you continue telling your story. Very true about getting your hormones checked. Your life can get wrecked if you don't check your hormones. Yeah, I actually do, like, as a mostly a favor to friends and people I know, some both advocacy work and educational work around not just endometriosis but reproductive conditions and hormones, because we don't talk about it, we don't talk about those impacts, and it's really hard to advocate around some of these topics. And the amount of people in my life who tell me about their lives and the symptoms they're having, and I'm like, hey, have you gotten your hormones checked? And then they go and get them checked because I suggested it, and they're like, actually, yeah. So it turns out that these things were low, or I've got a thyroid condition, or there's this other thing going on. And I was like, yeah, yeah. You will probably feel more like yourself if you get that done. So I don't have a question. I just want to wish you the best on your healing journey. You're phenomenal. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. I enjoy your storytelling. Your energy is very peaceful. Thank you so much. I have terrible amounts of anxiety, so I've learned to have a nice Zen feeling for the outside. It's a very interesting story. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here and for listening. Yeah, I I feel like so often we don't talk about these nuances. And I think the other thing is just, you know, there's so many things about myself that didn't change. More about me did not change in any of the hormonal states I was in than changed. And I've also found that we have this idea in our head, in our culture, that there's really big differences between men and women and non-binary people and agender people and all of these people. And most of us, we're just people. It's just people. And it doesn't, the other thing I wanted to mention was not knowing that trans people existed did not stop me from, one, being trans, and two, as my hormones changed, from feeling aligned. Because I was always this way. I was always running with the boys, wanting to be with the boys. I got sad when I got separated from my friends. I didn't know why people treated me any different, but they did. And now I just have a word for it. We have any advice for people at work, managers and colleagues about supporting individuals going through the process of an identity change? Yeah, so there are a ton of resources online for this. I would recommend looking into it. Honestly, there's like some logistical stuff that can be done around like pronoun placement and usage and like educating your team around, hey, this is what gender is. This is how different people can show up, and this is how we treat people. also being willing to stand up for whoever is going through that uh, change and being willing to be there for them is really important. Um, Learning their pronouns, understanding their story if they want to share it, and if they don't want to share it, that's also fine. I also think there's something about, uh, you know, the way I think about it, because being from small town Ohio, I had no idea this existed, this happened. I had my struggles, and ultimately deciding that, hey, that person knows themselves better than I do. So why should I question what their gender is, or what they words they want to use, or what they want to call themselves? They know themselves. I don't know them. And the least I can do is be respectful. And so those are the places, like the cornerstone things I would focus on. But there are resources. There are tons of resources, and there are tons of organizations. You can always hire a DI consultant. You can always hire someone like me. Like I do sometimes like consult on these kinds of things and help people through that experience. So those would be my initial suggestions. I think another thing I want to kind of highlight as we're winding down is there's a lot of conversation about trans and LGBT issues and things as being identities. And I think there is a certain amount of like, I identify as trans, right? It's something that like is a thing that exists in my head, but also it is a way that my life is experienced. Just like, yes, I identify as a Black man, and also that is an adjective of my description of manhood. Transgender is the same way. It is an adjective of my experience. So it's not saying we're having one-to-one experiences. I will never have the same one-to-one experience as a cis guy, but that doesn't mean it's not a male experience. So it's not just this concept that like lives in your head, you know? It took me a while to like wrap my head around it, but once I did, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. Then like, of course, just like there's tall people and short people, there's trans people and there's cis people, and there's so many different human beings on this planet. Of course, we're not all the same. Yeah. Is there any other thoughts, questions as we end this? We've got some people just saying they love this. Fascinating perspective and journey. Look forward to reading your subject on Medium. Um, yeah. Where can we find you on Medium online? Yeah, so on Medium, I'm under I'm going to, can I'm very dyslexic. Gradients. I'm everywhere at Gradients online. I end up doing work that is both some writing online. I just started a new YouTube channel. I do a lot of in-person classes, both for dance and for these kinds of topics and just storytelling in general. So you're welcome to follow me on all the things. I don't know. I'm still new to these things and still figuring out how to get all this set up. So there is a little bit, like have a little bit of grace with me and things. But yeah, I'm just happy to be here and have talked to y'all and give you a little bit of this perspective. Still learning about supporting your non-binary teen. Yeah, I mean, just like understanding, I think in some ways that, they were probably this way the whole time. And for that person particularly, this is a thought I had the other day. Okay, yeah, we got a couple minutes. Um, for most of my life, I thought that my grandmother didn't like me very much. And like some of that may or may not be true. But one of the reasons why I thought that was because I have an older brother, and she didn't give us the same gifts, despite us being very similar. And despite me being known as a tomboy and it being understood that I was a tomboy, and like I was open about it, that here are my interests, here's what I want to wear, here's what I like to do, here are the things. She chose to buy girlier things, feminine things. And because I didn't know being trans was a thing, I thought she didn't see me. She didn't understand me or was willfully choosing to not see me, to not care about me enough to get me something that was accurate to me. And it was only the other day that I realized, oh, well, partly because she probably had these conceptions of like, this is who you are, despite me telling her that this is who I am. And so for the person with the non-binary teen, um, yeah, um, I think having that also, I would say having that as a framework potentially to give your extended family might be helpful, or people around you who don't get it of like, hey, actually, kiddo was always like this. Like the words change, the look changes, but the person that you love is still there. And I think that's really the key for a lot of people is realizing the person you love is still there. They may look different, but they're still there. Yeah. What it is to really listen to a person, to really see a person. Yeah. It's something that, in my life, I really struggle to feel seen, um, both interpersonally and broadly. And it can be painful. It can be really painful. And so choosing to set down what you think a person is like and really hear and look at and see the person that's right in front of you is so incredibly valuable and healing. Particularly people, if you are a minority lottery winner like I am, um, who can't see themselves reflected in society at all. The only way I see myself reflected is when people one on one choose to reflect me. Or in this case, when I see myself on camera, which like looking good. I don't know. Why did I say this? Um, but yeah, we're rounding out the time. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope you've enjoyed Medium Day and you enjoy checking out some of these other talks for the last little bit that the event is going on. Um, the day isn't over. Yeah. Oh, thank you. The day isn't over, but I'm just gonna say this is the best session of the day. That is, I am honored. Thank you so much. Like that is incredibly sweet. Um, but yes, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day as you continue to participate on Medium Day. And feel free to find me online. I'm online now. I'm doing it. Um, yeah, that's all I have. Thank you so much.